All right, Scott, episode 6 on the power game, part of a 2-part episode. We're going to start with power from the backcourt on this episode, and then on our next, we're going to address all things power the kitchen. And this pod will release Wednesday, October 2nd, also known as my birthday. But we are filming right now on September 23rd. We leave for Virginia Beach tomorrow, and it is a huge week. It is a make or break week, ladies and gentlemen, for Scott and my team, the Bay Area Breakers. So, Scott, when this pod releases, the whole world will kind of know where we stand and if we have a chance for making the playoffs. Is that right?
Yeah, we have to perform. We have 7 matches coming up this week, and I am extremely optimistic and hopeful and excited, and I think we're going to do really well. This is the week we put it all together.
I agree, and I have been taking notes on all of your wisdom bombs from not just the pickleball breakdown, but all the private conversations, the one-on-one stuff we're able to do, and I'm so excited, like you said, to try and put it all together. So, let's get into the power game.
Kind of like the idea of starting with kind of philosophically, what is going on with the power game. I feel like I've been playing this game for 5 years, and I think we're transferring from kind of the basics are these soft game skills, and you need to learn these, and this is the way you play the game, and that's just what we're going to do. And I think in the last couple of years, with all of the new athletes that have come, and with the skill set that they bring, I think things are changing, have changed, and I think we need kind of a new set of rules, because it isn't just, hey, we're gonna play this soft game. Now that applies to the pros. How well that applies to amateur play, that's a different story, because there is a kind of a required skill set. If you're going to run this power game effectively, it's a low margin strategy, which takes a lot of skill and prep and practice to execute. So while I do observe this happening in the pro game, I don't know if I'm ready to recommend it to all of the amateurs, just to, hey, go out there, forget your drop shot if you don't like it, and just blast away.
Oof.
So but I definitely see I guess the way I would say it is, instead of plan A being, hey, we're going to drop and dink and play these slow, long points, plan A is now, hey, let's just big serve, big drive, let's crash, create chaos, and attack. Let's see how that works. And that's plan A. If that doesn't work, okay, we can downshift to the slow game. What do you think about that?
I love that we started off philosophically, and I'm a huge fan of basically everything you just said, and I have a question for you. So is there a cycle of learning? Is the cycle of a pickleball player, like everyone starts off, especially if they come from racket sports, power, 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 and then they work so hard, and they take so many lessons, and they listen to so many podcasts, and they watch so many YouTube videos to beat that out of themselves and to learn the soft. And now we're telling them to put the power back in. It's kind of mind-blowing, right? But someone really smart once told me, he has 2 cats and he does this podcast with me, once you learn the rules, you get to break them. So is that kind of the cycle of the player?
Yeah, I think there are probably a lot of amateurs that are kind of thinking that makes a lot of sense. That's sort of what they've been told. I think a lot because so many pickleball players come from tennis. Well, we're going to use the skills that we have and tennis player skills. Everyone can hit a drive, forehand and backhand, but hitting a soft shot is foreign and new, and it's like, oof, I don't like this. So they were probably forced to learn the soft game, and then now they've been playing for a while. Hopefully they developed that, and here we are saying, oh, it's all about the power game. So yeah, break out that drive if you still have it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had students tell me, but you told me not to speed up cross court. And it's a little bit what you and I said on the last pod, which is when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It's like, okay, well, you weren't ready to do that when we were working together 2 months ago because you didn't have any of the other skills. But now that you have a lot of the other skills, you can break some of those rules. I want to address one thing you said. The power game can be a low margin strategy. And I literally had this conversation this morning where I said, I don't think you trying to be more aggressive needs to result in a higher risk strategy. Like, are those things really mutually exclusive? And I personally have been working really hard on my attacks. And I realized something. Just because I'm attacking doesn't mean it's high risk, low margin. I can make my attacks as low risk and high margin as hitting an aggressive dink. So when I get that green light ball, when I get that dead dink they give me, I'm actually changing my behavior from hitting an aggressive dink to hitting like an off speed up. And I'm trying to convince myself, and I think this is the truth, that doesn't make it high risk.
Yeah, I mean, if your aggression is coming as part of a combination of shots, then you're doing it. I like to tell people, hey, you want to do this on your terms, right? What I don't like seeing is watching someone play and they're kind of reaching out of position and a little desperate, and then that's the flick that they try. It's like, that was not on your terms. That was just sort of out of desperation, and those don't work. But when you are moving the ball around, or in this case, when we're talking about the power game, if, and I've said this before, I like to give my partner permission to hit a big serve so they know, hey, I don't care if you miss. Just let's go with a big serve so that we can get a drivable third, and let's go on the attack this point. So it's like we have a plan. We are setting this thing up, and that makes us much more likely to succeed than if it's just kind of wasn't really thinking about it. Oh, this looks drivable. And then if you are even a half step late in pickleball, it's too late because the ball just doesn't give you that much time. So it's like when you are planning for it, I think that really increases your chance for success. So while it might be a higher risk, lower probability play, you increase your chances if you set yourself up correctly.
And we're going to get into the technical elements of big serves, big drives, and big returns, everything from the backcourt. But first, I want to ask you, how does someone listening at home know if they should be more aggressive in their game or less aggressive?
That's a good question. I think the things to notice is sort of the length of point. Like, it's like, are we playing, are these just short points? When someone is over driving, the points, if you're over driving and it's not working, the points are really short. If it's going into the net, that's just it. You toss the ball over side out. Or if it's, you adjust and you hit it higher and it's flying long. So when you're serving, if you're having short points, you could, that's when you maybe want to dial it back. If you are not aggressive enough, I would say that is probably that describes my game when I play, high level senior pro pickleball. I tend to have very long points and I'm tired at the end of the day. And it's like, I probably could have made some of these points shorter, looked for my spots more kind of aggressively, or I could have anticipated better. I think it's just kind of length of point is probably how you identify like which.
All right. So what if you're like, yeah, I have a lot of short points and I win all my matches?
Well,
great. Keep doing it.
Yeah, if that's working, then you're climbing the ranks, but you are going to meet someone eventually. That tells me you're not playing against good enough competition.
Good enough players. I agree. All right. So Scott, what is an average length of point? Take me through like at the pro level, and then let's go down a point every level.
So if we call the top two men's teams, the top, the 7-0 plus, their points are extremely long. And it is because they're so solid at everything. Their defense is so good that they have to earn almost every attack. And that takes a long time and it's a lot of dinking. So at the top, and it's really only the top 3 or 4 men's teams. Like even once you get down to, 5 through the rest of them, those are shorter points. And it's because their defense isn't as comprehensively great at the kitchen as those top 4 or 5 teams. Like they're just so good, you can't just blast away because you just get countered and punished. You have to earn it. But there's as you go down in level, the offense becomes better than the defense, and so it works.
So then are we saying in the men's game, what is it, 12 points is an average rally? Or I'm sorry, 12 shots? Is that the number?
I haven't seen stats on that. I would, at the very top, I would think it's even longer than that, but that sounds about right. On average, that's actually quite a bit.
Yeah. I'll look it up and insert it. I look at Real Clear Stats because after every MLP, they post, average shots or, average number of shots per rally, which I loved. And I think it's around 12 at the men's pro level. And of course, as we know, it's much smaller or significantly smaller, statistically significant on the women's side. Why is that, Scott? Why are women's points shorter and men's points longer?
I think it's because in the women's game, their offense is a little better than their defense. The men are slightly bigger, so their defense can be slightly better covering those margins. And the women are just a little smaller, but they still hit the ball just as hard, and they're very accurate with it. So it's harder to defend against such good incoming offense. So I think that.
Okay. For everyone listening at home, see what I did there? I tried to trap Scott. I tried to get him into being like, women are just really impatient, but he didn't. He actually answered exactly what I was thinking, which is it's a small court. Guys are bigger. So I totally agree with that.
The length of point is about defensive skills. And the better the defense, the longer the point is going to last. And, so as you kind of go lower and lower in level, I think, both defense and offense, decrease. But I think defense is much worse for a 5-0 player than a 6-0 or a 7-0. I think but the offense, I know plenty of 5-0s who have really good offense still. So It's like when your offensive skills just outweigh your defensive skills, well, then that's kind of good. That's the way you're going to play, and you're going to have short, attacking, somewhat chaotic points.
Do you think it's time to talk about the serve and how to serve big?
Yeah, it's like I think if you're going to play a power game, an attacking game, I think that just you have the ball in your hand, you have control over what you're doing. It's like I would say commit to I'm going to serve big because I have practiced it. I have kind of philosophically come to terms with this is how I want to play. So it's like, I want to play this way. I've practiced this. And so now I believe that I can do it in the match. It's like, I would make sure I prepare that way. I don't and I say this because I can't just turn it on. Like, as much as I would love to, in practice, I can rip serves. In a match that counts and people are watching, the faith just isn't quite there enough if I haven't hit buckets of serves in advance so that I really can trust it. And it's really all about, am I dialed in on just how low over the net I'm going to hit this ball consistently to trust that I can crush this serve and it's going to work. So yes, having an aggressive serve is about preparation. It's about believing that's what you want to do and then preparing, adequately so that you can pull it off. Because you can't, I just don't think you can suddenly one day in the middle of a match decide, okay, now I'm gonna rip it. Now, occasionally you can do that because what happens is this has happened to me a lot of times. I'm down 9-2. I'm about to lose this match. Whatever. Let me just start ripping serves, and they go in. And they go in because it's like, well, you've lost your nerves, and it's like you've kind of conceded defeat. Let me just try this last ditch effort. That's not what we're talking about. It's like, no, you need to kind of trust it when you're only as good as when you're nervous and you're down 9-10. Can you do it then? So it, kind of starts with your belief in your practice.
Couldn't agree more. And how can someone at home practice having a huge serve? For me, a drill I give my students is I'll take a couple cones and I'll put them 4 feet behind the baseline. And I'll say, miss it. And if anyone comes to me with the yips, I go, swing this one at the back of the fence. And I've never seen someone do it successfully. I've seen, it takes like an hour for them to loosen up enough to actually get the ball to the back of the fence. So for me, I think instead of me sitting here and going, well, start 3 feet behind the baseline and give me a really good right foot to left foot weight transfer, and be sure to rotate your hips and come up on one foot so you can really leverage the velocity from the ground. Like, we can do that. Scott and I can do that all day, you guys, right? But it's amazing how, for me, a couple simple targets, a little bit past the baseline, and giving you the permission, the okay, the green light to go for it. It's amazing how your body then figures out the mechanics. So Scott, what can we do for everyone listening at home to get that big, powerful serve in a way that doesn't, hurt our mind with your math major degree?
Yeah, I liked kind of that last thing you said, where if you just visualize the target, your body will figure out how to get it there. Like, we don't need to, I can't technically tell you how your feet need to be and like turn your hips. And there's plenty of videos that'll show you those things. But like, for me, a huge key for me, like when I'm practicing, is I notice that I can hit it as hard as I can. And if I am accurate, having the height over the net be just very low over the net. Where I get in trouble is when my hard serve is a foot over the net. That's just too high, and the trajectory is up, and the thing just flies. And that's my when I try to be aggressive and miss long, it's because my net height was too high. So when I'm trying to, like, mentally, my mindset when I'm going to hit a big serve is keep this low over the net, and you can hit it as hard as you want. And that gives me that little swing thought is a good one for me.
My oldest sister was the number one tennis player at 15 years old in the 18 and under category. She traveled the world. She played in all 4 majors. She went pro at 16 years old. And I was like 10 years old, and I asked her for a lesson, and she looked at me and went, all you need to know about tennis is you can hit your ground strokes as hard as you can if you put as much spin as you can on them. And I was like, that's a great point. So it reminds me of what you just said, which is when I'm hitting my serve, you're thinking about it a little different. You're saying keep it low and you can hit as hard as you can. I think I can hit it a little bit higher if I put that spin on it, and I can unleash, and that spin will bring it down. So I think we're skinning a cat in a couple different ways. And that's about as technical as I get, candidly, on my serve.
Yeah, and I think if I felt more comfortable that I can apply a lot of topspin to my serve, I would use what you said. I would like to be able to use that. I would use that in tennis also. I never really hit the ball that hard in tennis, but I would put a lot of spin on it. But I have not developed a high spinning serve because, the rules kind of make it difficult, or at least they make it difficult for me.
Is your drive technique, let's say on the forehand, is it the same as your serve technique?
For me, it's not. For me, drive technique, at first it was like tennis, but it's just so not tennis. You don't have the time, and the length of swing, a tennis swing is much longer. So the backswing has to be shorter and quicker. The footwork has to be faster. The steps have to be smaller and more of them, just because there just isn't that kind of time in the ball. Also, a pickleball is not as predictable as a tennis ball. So it's going to bounce lower, and it's going to skid. It's going to do weird stuff. So quick preparation, small swing, small recoil, everything small, short, and quick, is kind of what pickleball drives kind of need to have. And those are my swing thoughts too. I really am kind of thinking about short loaded prep with my paddle, down and ready to go, as opposed to some long flowing thing.
Yeah.
Now that's just me, and that's just my forehand. In the women's pro game, there are so many nice circular flowing backhands. That's a different thing. I don't have a pretty backhand, so I can't even speak to that. You can speak to the backhand, but for me, like when I think forehand, I want everything short, compact, and fast.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, my serve technique in pickleball is very different than my drive technique. I think that's totally normal. And I think the single biggest mistake I see from students and amateur players on their drives are they are driving at about 150% speed, and they're taking humongous swings. And it's not just about lessening that so you can get your drive in the court. It's actually about slowing it down so your partner can get in and poach, or you can set up a self-poach. So really think about that at home. The slower you drive the ball, the quicker you get in after it. And I'll give you guys a perfect example. I was playing nationals with Connor Garnett last November, and we were playing against Maggie, Brasha, and Hayden. Patrick Quinn, I think we had a 3-game battle with them, if I remember correctly. And I was hitting these great inside-out backhand drives from the right side, setting up Connor. And I do this 3 times, and he misses each poach. And he looks at me after the third and says, "Your drives are so good, but they're too fast, and I can't poach them." So the very next ball, I get that same backhand drive, and I'm so uncomfortable, Scott. I'm like, ugh, if I swing slower, it's going to float, and Hayden's going to come in and crush it. Yeah. And I swung slower, and he got to the line, the kitchen line, literally as Maggie was making contact, and he poached perfectly. And it was like this aha moment for me, like, oh my God, I'm a pro player, and I didn't even know I needed to swing slower. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? And is that a common mistake you see as well?
Yeah, when I'm teaching, when I was giving lessons and people are driving, and I kind of describe why driving isn't, like, people will ask, what makes a good drive? And it's like, well, the height over the net is pretty much everything. Because if you hit it hard and 6 inches over the net, if you've hit it hard, it's going to keep going, and it's going to meet your opponent about chest high, and they're just going to smack a volley very hard. I mean, and this is kind of why the driving attacking philosophy, I call it, kind of, it's somewhat high risk, is that you have it, to me, about less than 6 inches of net height to hit the ball into. If it's lower than that, you're hitting the net and losing. If it's much higher than that, it's easy to let it go. It goes out. If it's around 6 inches or a foot over the net, that is a pretty standard routine volley that people are going to hit hard, and you are now still behind in the point. You have a small target, and that small target takes, to consistently hit that small target and play this power game, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes talent, and it takes, you have to really know your game. You have to really be able to identify which ball, as it's coming over, is this a ball that I really can control and get this into that low spot. But like, back to your point, even if sometimes hitting it 60, 50%, 70%, if the slower you hit it, the more slowly you hit it, the more chance it has to dip, to drop, and also the more chance, as you said, your partner has to get in. I also think, to me, I think I'm okay at changing speeds of my swing. So it's like, oh, well, the more controlled my swing, the better chance I do have of controlling the height of that ball. Smart. So that it's like, yes, my slower swing drive is better than my hard swing drive. Usually,
and that's a shorter swing drive. I love that. I love that you're distilling these complex things that can get really technical, and people listening at home can go watch a million YouTube videos, but it's like, dude, shorten your swing, aim a little bit lower, you're welcome. Like, this is how the pros think about it. Like, we really try and just simplify it, because when you're in the heat of the moment and your adrenaline's pumping and it's 20 all in MLP, it's like, you got to have like 1 to 2 keys for each shot that keeps you calm and keeps you on track. And I remember Jaume said to me at the beginning of the year, we were playing the Masters, and I said, how do you drive the ball that well? He goes, I aim for the tape and I hit 70% speed. and I love that, right?
Yeah. I the one time I got to play him, it wasn't in a tournament, but he was not hitting at 70% speed. He was just eating me up with that thing. And it has such good action. But him hitting 70% with the action he has on it. He has a lot of spin. It has a lot of dip. That is such a good drive. I mean, there's a reason that, like, talk about like how to use the power game. Yeah, when you have a drive like that he can control at 70% with all the spin that's dipping, that's the shot you want. You want people, like, your goal is, if your drive if they are making contact at net height or below that, even better, you are now ahead in the point.
As far as getting it lower, right? Scott and I don't care if you're hitting topspin, flat, slice, huge swing, small swing. We don't care. If the trajectory of your drive is just over the tape and it's consistent, keep doing what you're doing. Now, Scott, if it's not, and this is what happens to me. I don't really miss drives in the net. I will definitely miss them more high. So if we're struggling at home with getting our drives down, what's like 1 or 2 keys to help us get the drive down?
For me, I would sort of picture the trajectory of the ball and think it had the apex has to be on my side so that by the time it gets to the net, it needs to already be dipping. And then I would say to myself, the only way that's going to happen is if I take some pace off of it. So I can't hit this ball hard, but so I need to kind of pick the right ball. I've got to be able to hit it from high enough. So am I choosing the right ball to drive? But it's like if I need to get it down, it kind of has to get up sooner so that it can get down sooner. And then it would be apply more spin if possible. It's like, if I have a I would just add more spin and more brush to my technique, which also should take some pace off of it. Hopefully get a little dwell time, add some spin.
Love that. So for me, it's shortening my swing, which will naturally actually slow your swing. And then the third and most important key for me, and I realized this playing PPA Atlanta with CJ Klinger against Megan Dazan and Andre Daescu, another death battle. How come I don't win the death battles? We have to talk about that later. I need a mental episode on how to win the death battles.
That's a pretty strong team.
So in that, it was like every forehand drive I touched hit the back of the fence. I was like, what is going on? And it was the first time in my pickleball career where I'll never forget this feeling of like, I can't adjust. Like what? Like I can usually adjust my way out of anything. Like, oh, I'm hitting, my dinks in the net. Okay, I know what I need to do, or XYZ is happening. And I couldn't adjust this forehand drive. And I went back and watched a ton of video. And I was hitting my forehand drive on the rise. The ball was rising. So for me, and I do this, and I don't do this on my backhand. And so, we all have a stronger leg. We all have a stronger eye. And there's something about when that ball's kind of coming in my forehand that makes me anxious to hit it sooner. And so if I just really commit to hitting my forehand drive when the ball is coming down, just waiting as long as I can, I almost always hit a good drive.
Yeah, like as you described, I kept doing this thing and it continued to be wrong and I couldn't get it. Like for me, I immediately went to when that happens to me, it's because I'm kind of falling back as I hit it, thinking, oh, if I fall back, that'll brush up and it'll work. And it's like that does not work as well as moving sooner so that I can step in. And stepping in and having better rhythm and timing is kind of going to be the answer to that. But you can't see yourself in the moment. It's kind of why it's nice to have a coach watching while you're playing, just a second set of eyes to just remind you of little things like that.
Got it. So for everyone listening at home, key takeaway there is just make sure Scott and I are present physically at your matches and can give you real-time feedback.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes, you guys. Scott, anything else to add either philosophically or technically on the drive before we move on to the last power shot from the backcourt, which is the return?
I think the only thing we've touched on it a little bit, but if you're going to play this style, you want to have agreement with your partner that this is what we're doing. And that doesn't mean it has to be for the entire game. It could be just for a point here and there. But it works really nice. We haven't really talked about it in combination. It's like, hey, if you're going to be taking this drive, then have your partner hustle in for the poach and attack that. And it's like, we're going to play this attacking style, do it together, right? It's a team effort. So it's like I would include the partner in this kind of strategic plan. Love that. Yeah. And I think back to the days where I'm driving my best and I feel so
forward, like you talked about, falling on your back foot. And I think a function of I'm driving well when my weight's moving forward and I'm falling forward, almost like there's a tether, there's a line on the net, and it's tied to my belly button, and I'm being pulled in by this invisible force. So, which leads me to my question: how do you know when to drive? Like, what's the signal that, like, oh my gosh, drive this ball? Because I see so many of my students get a very drivable ball and they drop it, and I'm just like, mind blown.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's when you have the time to get your feet behind it, so that then it's like, oh, my feet are there, so I can step in. My paddle is ready to go, and the ball is going to be high enough that I can get this ball. I don't want it to be rising, and I don't want, if I hit this hard, is it going to fly if it's too low? So it's like, if the ball's bouncing up enough and then I have the time to get there, that is, to me, an offensive drive. There's also kind of, if the return is so good, I'm like at the back fence, I would hit a defensive drive on that one. That's probably a different topic, but it's like, that's more of a desperate thing. But we're talking about offensive driving, and to me, that's where I'm hitting this from inside the court. So it really is about judging the return that I'm going to have the time to prepare and hit this thing offensively. And as you said, if I do that, I can easily follow my momentum will just naturally have me follow it in.
I was curious if you were going to touch on this, and you did. There's almost two types of drives happening. There's the drive where you got a short high ball and you're like, amazing, I'm going to poach, or my partner's going to poach. This is so obvious. This is so great. And then there's the, shoot, they hit a really good return. I'm on my back foot. The fence is right behind me, and there's a defensive drive. And those are my two triggers to drive the ball: the short, high, easy, and then the shoot back foot. So I'm really happy that you address that. So Scott, let's talk about power returns. We've done a whole episode on the third shot. We've done a whole episode on serve. We've done a whole episode on returns. But I like that we're kind of taking this deeper dive and closer look at these topics from a power lens, a power perspective. And we actually had a comment on our return video on YouTube that was like, everything you guys talked about sounds good, but there's players who are breaking a lot of the rules that you talked about. And I responded back to that comment and said, yeah, we actually talked about Kwang Duong and the fact that there's these hyper athletic males and females entering the game and breaking the rules and doing things differently. So talk to me, Scott, and talk to us about this notion of a power return.
Yeah, I think, when I learned the game in 2019, the idea was, and I have a nice slice return. So that slice, it hangs in the air a while and it goes deep in the court. And right, like when a deep return is a very good return. And as I slice it and it spends time in the air, that gives me time to run up and get to the kitchen. And so both of those things are great. But our topic today is the power game and kind of the new way of playing. Pickleball is evolving. Well, my slicing return that gives my opponent a lot of time to set up and rip a forehand with spin. And so even if it's deep, they can get that thing dipping below net height on me. So it's like versus people with a great forehand, deep slicing return, if it's not staying down, may not be helping me. I may be setting up someone with a huge forehand to just rip their power game. So I think what people have developed in the last couple of years is, hey, let me just hit this return ground stroke style, hard through the air. It's gonna go hard and deep to them. I will take a little bit of my time away, but if I really power through this return and keep it down, it shouldn't bounce up. So it's going to be a tough drive. And so even if they drive it, I'm still going to have like a makeable volley. They're not going to be able to dip it if I hit this thing hard. And so hitting powerful returns, you take your time away, but you also take their options away. And, I think you give people a tougher third on average if you are able to hit this power return.
I would never teach it unless I had a really fast student. because it's hard for me to hit the return hard and get to the kitchen line in time. And that's just a function of how fast you can go from behind the baseline to, either the line or a couple feet behind it. But I think we'd be remiss not to address that it is a style and it is happening. And like you said, it takes a lot of options away from your opponent. I'm definitely not against anyone trying all sorts of stuff. And that leads me to a point about, well, how do you know which returns best or most effective? How do you know which type of drive is the most effective? And how do you know which one of your 3 different serves is the most effective? And how I would answer that is, if you're lucky like me and you have an amazing training partner, a go-to drilling partner, go out with them and say, I'm going to hit you 3 serve types. I'm not going to tell you which one I like the best. Tell me which you find the hardest to return. And I have found that super effective in helping mold my game with my favorite drilling partner here in the desert. Scott, do you have any other suggestions in terms of how people could practice kind of the topics we've discussed today?
Yeah, I do like going out and getting in. Like, I kind of like to think of it as hundreds of reps. It's like sometimes it's not even. I mean, I think using a ball machine or just hitting baskets of balls. I just think getting so many. If you get in enough reps, you sort of figure out what's working for you. You just unconsciously make little adjustments between shots, and then you kind of find a rhythm that is working for you. So, I mean, I like a lot what you just said. So I'm just kind of adding to that. One way that, I like to test out new stuff is, let me do this a few hundred times and see, you just modify it slightly here and there. And then after enough reps, you just, you find something that feels good to you.
You can actually also practice a drive alone. And the reason I ended up learning this was watching CJ Klinger. I have never seen another pro player, actually any player, feed a ball like CJ. He drops it, has it land on the ground, and then will either hit you a drop or drive the ball at you. And I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I tried that. And now I feed the ball, letting it bounce first instead of catching it in the air, because it teaches me lag. It teaches me patience. I have to wait for the ball to ascend, and then I get to train myself watching it drop. And it's amazing. I can work on both my drops and my drives by simply dropping the ball from my left hand or even tossing it and running after it. Is that crazy? Have you seen anyone else practice alone that way, their drives and their drops?
I mean, tennis has been taught that way for a long time, but with the rubber ball, you get a little higher bounce, a little more time to do stuff. But I think this works well for pickleball too, because, well, you don't get that bounce in pickleball. So just dropping it yourself, you adjust to the timing of the lack of bounce of a pickleball. So, that is a totally valid way to practice, because the bounce you're getting, on a dropped ball is the same kind of height bounce you're going to get on a ball that someone's hitting to you. So that is absolutely and the other thing, I mean, the reason it works so well in tennis is that on a bounced ball, you have to generate all the pace. And when you have to generate all the pace, your technique has to be very good for this to go well. So you're teaching yourself you will develop good technique doing this, because if you don't have good technique, it won't work.
I love it, Scott. Anything else philosophically or otherwise you'd like to touch on?
No, I mean, I think we captured some really good, points about the power game and kind of tips for how, you can use it in your game. It's like, as we've been just kind of talking this out, I've already kind of made some plans for how I'm going to use it in my games. So yeah, I think there's good stuff here.
As far as next week, Scott, I think I have never been more excited for an episode than I am for our next part 2 of the power game, which is all things attacking at the kitchen: bounce speed ups, volley speed ups, and counters. Is there anything else we're going to talk about next episode?
I think this is where also kind of maybe a little bit of, poaching or kind of off the ball mentality as being an attacking player. So we'll probably throw some of that in too.
Ooh, I love that off the ball mentality. I love, love, love that. So you guys do not miss our next episode, part 2 on all things in the power game. Wish Scott and I good luck at MLP. And if you missed the last episode on the 4th shot, I think it was maybe the most important, possibly the best episode we have done. So please go and check that one out. And as always, email us, drop a comment. We'll see you next time. So the very next, let her in. Oh, it's funny. My cats are coming to me now. We'll edit this. Hi, baby.
Yeah, dueling felines.